Professor Sachs is an American economist, public policy analyst, and a leading commentator in matters pertaining to geopolitics. Professor Sachs teaches at Columbia University. Professor Sachs, welcome back to India and Global Left.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I wanted to discuss Iran, of course, given the two rogue regimes, the US and Israel, have once again attacked the nation of Iran. Your response on the attack?
This is a strategy that goes back 30 years. The US and Israel aim for hegemony in West Asia. And this has been carried out through a series of wars with Iran as the big target, actually dating back to Netanyahu's entry as Prime Minister of Israel. So this is basically a CIA Mossad long-term strategy. It has left a trail of blood throughout the Middle East, actually stretching from Libya, which the US and Israel and others overthrew in 2011, killing Muammar Gaddafi and putting Libya into turmoil. It stretches to Sudan, where Mossad played a major role in fomenting the breakup of Sudan. It includes the genocide in Gaza, the occupation and annexation of the West Bank. It includes the overthrow of the Syrian government, which was a CIA Mossad operation that began in 2011. It includes the invasion of Iraq by the United States in 2003. And the plan all along has been to overthrow the government of Iran one way or another. They have used bombing in the past. They have used assassinations in the past. They have used economic warfare in the past. Now they're trying again with another bombing campaign. This one will fail also, but I think the consequences for the world will be very serious.
Apart from the bombing campaign or using economic warfare previously, they have also bombed elementary high schools, killing girls, more than hundreds in numbers in Minab in Hormozgan province in southern Iran. Can it be defined as a terror tactic to terrorize citizens of Iran?
Israel committed a genocide in Gaza. It killed tens of thousands of children. So Israel is a terrorist state. This is unfortunately the sad fact.
Donald Trump, in his war speech, has openly called for quote unquote regime change. He has asked Iranians to rise up against their own government. The idea is that this decapitation of the leadership would lead to a vacuum. But analysts on Iran has said that most likely leadership would the old guards, which would be more nationalistic, would fill the space. There are also reports about Iran being turned into a garrison state like North Korea, essentially diverting more important resources from civilian and economic use towards military uses. I wonder your thoughts on that.
Iran is very much an institutionalized polity. The killing of the supreme leader is an outrage. Assassinating foreign heads of state is extremely dangerous, provocative, reckless, illegal behavior. Gloating about it is beyond vulgar. But it doesn't end a government. There will not be, quote, boots on the ground in Iran by the United States or Israel. A decapitation strike, literally killing the head of government, is not going to change the Iranian government. It's going to basically put the policy in a war mode, which means that the Islamic Revolutionary Corps, Guard Corps, will be in charge. They are not surrendering. They understand they have more missiles than Israel and the United States have missile defenses. And so this idea of regime change by the US and Israel is like so many other delusional actions by the United States and Israel, essentially doomed to fail.
Last time the US made a full invasion in the region was Iraq in 2003, which led to massive destabilization of the region, including creation of forces like the Islamic State, which has now become, or maybe even before, have become allies of the US, paradoxically. What kind of instability do you see in the region, given Iranian response has been quite extensive, largely attacking US military assets in the Persian Gulf, and Iranian officials have said that in the defense of their country, there would be no red lines or fewer and fewer red lines, indicating that this might escalate into direct confrontation with the GCC countries. What kind of destabilizations do you foresee?
Well, the first point, obviously, is that the Gulf states are semi-vassal states of the United States, or in some cases, essentially vassal states. They house the U.S. military, and this is always double-edged, or even maybe single-edged with a blade at their throat, which is that housing the U.S. military means not that you're protected by the United States, but that you are a vassal of the United States. You can't object to the U.S. They will overthrow you. They will create a regime change operation in their own territory. Having U.S. military bases means having CIA operations actively operating on your territory. So this is unfortunately the state of the Gulf region. The Gulf region cannot speak its mind and doesn't speak its mind. And Iran is attacking these U.S. assets and showing the Gulf region that basically Kissinger's old adage, to be an enemy of the United States is dangerous, but to be a friend is fatal. And this is what is happening right now. I recommend to any country, by the way, if you don't have a U.S. military base, don't think about it. If you do have one, invite them to go home so that you can have sovereignty. I always recommend to India on every occasion, get out of the Quad, for God's sake. This is absolutely self-destructive of India's interests to be playing games with the United States this way. India is too great a power to be playing U.S. games. So this is what the Gulf countries are seeing right now.
And what is your sense of the impact of Iranian response on Israel as a state and society?
We're in the early days, and a lot will be decided in the battlefield. I am not an original expert on such issues, but the ones that I listen to say that Iran has more missiles than the U.S. and Israel have missile defenses. If that's the case, then what we have in the coming days is a war of attrition between missiles and missile defenses. And since the United States will not knock out Iran in this process, it means that Israel will be very vulnerable to Iranian attacks, maybe not in the next week, but in the next weeks. This is a military question predominantly. If it's correct in the analysis that Israel and the United States are not able to destroy these heavily bunkered underground mobile missile systems, and they're not able to end the regime itself, it means that there is no game plan between or beyond a couple of weeks. By all military accounts that I hear, the U.S. has 2 or 3 weeks of its munitions in the region to carry out this bombing. After that, who knows? But the United States, anyway, had a pretty bare cupboard after all of the other wars that the United States has been engaged in. The Israeli campaign in Gaza, which put a lot of stress on U.S. inventories, the Ukraine war. So there's a lot of bravado, but there's quite possibly going to be a clarity of this situation in 2 or 3 weeks, showing that if the first strike didn't do it, this has been a losing proposition. That's what we hear Trump was advised. We'll see.
One of the objectives, apart from breaking up Iran, is to diminish the influence, rising or growing influence of China and Russia in the region. There are two questions on that front. One is what kind of support would Russia and China give Iran, given Iran has been attacked? There are talks about Russian missile defense systems that have already been transferred, S-300 and so on. There are also reports about Chinese radar system to counter U.S.-Israeli stealth missiles. What kind of support would they give? And secondly, what would the U.S. and Israel be able to diminish Russia and China's growing influence in the region?
Well, again, China and Russia will definitely support Iran in a number of ways, some that we'll know about, others that we will not know about. But in terms of munitions, intelligence, raw materials, and finance, Iran will get support. No question about it. And that is because the converse of this is that part of the U.S. Aim of hegemony is to commandeer the oil exports of Iran, which go heavily to China, because the United States is trying basically to break the flow of oil to China, whether from Venezuela or Iran or Russia. And so this is part of a crazy U.S. game plan that has China in its sights, not Iran. Let's just say the U.S. is in way over its head, in my view. China's approach in general is keep the powder dry. China does not get involved directly in wars. It lets the United States spend trillions of dollars in wars. It lets the United States get entangled in all of these events. It lets the United States fall through its own devices. So China will not openly fight, but it will definitely support Iran.
I wanted to ask you about the mood in the U.S. regarding this war. We have read about the protests in Times Square in New York City. If you could tell us more about the mood regarding this war in your country.
Just before the war started, the opinion polls showed that around 20% of the public supported a war. The overwhelming majority opposed the war. Trump campaigned against regime change operations. So what is happening right now, which is a longstanding CIA Mossad program, is not what Trump told his own people. Trump himself is unpopular and increasingly unpopular. This war will accelerate the decline of his popularity unless, out of all reason to doubt it, the U.S. has some kind of win, so-called, in this. Even then, the boost would not be significant, but it's very unlikely that there will be any boost. Rather, there will be negative fallout politically from this. And if the fighting goes as is widely anticipated, that Iran holds its ground and actually gains an edge over time as the anti-missile systems are depleted, Trump will possibly see a plummeting of his support. So what you have is an unpopular regime that is already in a process of losing support. If we have open elections in November, and Trump may well try to stop that, but if we do on schedule, he will lose them. And that will be a further big political blow because he will then be impeached by a majority in the lower house. And so this is a failed presidency, in my view. I've said that from the very beginning. I've said to Indian friends, don't cater to this man, don't trust this person, don't make concessions to him, don't be part of the Quad with him. Just be careful. Watch your ground. This is a failed presidency. And I think that that's how it's going to play out.
We saw massive protests during the genocide, particularly in the U.S. campus, university campuses. In contrast, during the kidnapping of the Venezuelan president, there were very muted demonstrations. I wonder, are these demonstrations extensive in the US, or is it not even an issue when it comes to domestic politics? Or in other words, is the Middle East not even an issue within domestic politics?
I'm sure that this is an issue, but the way it will become an issue is through events in the coming days. If there are American loss of lives, if Iranian missiles pierce Israel's Iron Dome, which is very likely to be the case, if there is a big spike of oil prices, which is very possible, that will give an immediacy to this issue. There is an opposition to what's happening. I don't know, as of Sunday morning, my time, whether that's manifesting on the streets across the U.S. I spent a lot of the day yesterday at the UN, not really observing what's happening inside the U.S., so I can't give you a definitive account, but it will generally be something that will take place over weeks rather than hours in this case. Just to say, there was a Gallup survey also that was released a few days ago, which showed that for the first time in history, more Americans side with the Palestinians than with the Israelis. This is a very important change. If I remember correctly, and I may have the numbers slightly wrong, it was 41% said that they are on the Palestinian side, 36% for Israel. This is a swing from something like 60% pro-Israel, 15% Palestinian a few years ago. This is a momentous change. Israel is, in my view, committing a kind of political suicide by its really fascistic practices.
Talking about the UN, large sections of people across the world have rightly, in my opinion, considered the UN and the international rule-based order to be very, very ineffective, particularly when the US decides to invade or bomb countries unilaterally. I wonder your thoughts about any mechanisms through the UN that can be moved in to counter this criminal and illegal war.
I was at the UN Security Council yesterday. Actually, the British stopped me from testifying because I had been invited to testify, but the British, because they are such lovers of free speech and open debate, stopped me from testifying. They had the presidency of the council until yesterday. By the way, as bad as the United States is, in my opinion, the English are worse. I used to say the British are worse, but I got an email from somebody in Wales a few months ago, and they said, "Mr. Sachs, don't blame the Welsh. we haven't done anything. It's the English. I think the English are the worst, actually, the most violent, arrogant, uh, uh, empire-obsessed people on the planet. They don't know that they lost their empire till this moment. In any event, they stopped me from testifying, so I'm just ranting a little bit. But what we saw interesting at the Security Council yesterday was a big division. Uh, Most of the countries blamed Iran. They blamed Iran for being attacked. It was extraordinary. But when you looked at it, it was very simple. If the U.S. has a military base in your country, you go with the U.S. propaganda line. And there were, by my count, 8. I actually have the list here: Bahrain, Colombia, Denmark, Greece, Latvia, Panama, UK, and US that either have US military bases or give the US military rights to the local bases. Those countries essentially blamed Iran because they're vassals of the United States. It's very hard to be a sovereign country with the US military on your soil. This has been the US trick all along. And it's the trick in Europe, which is a vassal region of the United States. It's the trick in the Gulf. And so we had the absolute stunning facts of Latvia and Denmark. I'm looking at my list. Speaking harshly about the unprovoked attacks by Iran, through the looking glass, completely the opposite of the truth. Yet that's what happens when you become a U.S. vassal state. The U.S. is today's British Empire. It is a violent, rapacious empire that rules by decapitation strikes or regime change operations. And if you are part of that empire because you house the military, if you're part of NATO because you have military bases in the Gulf, you don't speak clearly. And so yesterday's meeting at the Security Council, on the one hand, was a very big disappointment because these ambassadors, just cannot defend the most basic proposition of the UN Charter, which is Article 2, Paragraph 4, that nations may not use the threat of force or force against other UN sovereign states. They can't defend that. The British, the French, the Latvians, the Danes, but it's a very particular group. And then when one looks at the world as a whole, well, this U.S. alliance is about 15% of the world population. The other 85% are not part of the U.S. alliance, and they should say, no, thank you. And India should say, no, thank you. And the BRICS should say, no, thank you, because it is a absolute distortion of reality. It is an imperium, or would be imperium, and it's a deadly one. So this is what the UN Security Council showed yesterday. I'm not giving up on the UN because I don't want to give up on 85% of the world population. I don't even want to give up on the United States because we can have a change when all of this delusional imperial aspiration is finally exhausted. But for right now, that's the basic count. If you have the U.S. military, you're probably going to parrot the U.S. propaganda.
I wanted to end by asking you a broader question about West Asia, and that is, do you see U.S. influence and power in the region diminishing, or is it much more deeply entrenched, given there was a time when many journals were talking about pivoting away from West Asia, It was around the time when U.S. forces withdrew from Afghanistan and the rhetorics against China was rising. The idea was to focus more on East Asia. But given what has happened in Syria, given what we have seen in occupied Palestinian territories, weakening of Hezbollah, and what is now happening in Iran, is it fair to say that U.S. Power and influence in the region is more deeply entrenched now?
I wouldn't say deeply entrenched, but the intention of the United States is to remain the regional imperium. And the modus operandi for doing that is Israel. So the idea is that Israel should be the regional military power. But we can see that this is a fragile case, not a reality. For the moment, the U.S. and Israel feel that they have that. Israel has a monopoly on nuclear weapons in the region. While none of their regime change operations have created puppet states that are stable, they have effectively overthrown governments from Libya to Iraq. And so, in this sense, there's an appearance of continued dominance. And the Gulf region, as I've just explained, because it has the U.S. military bases, is on the surface pretty subservient to the United States. But all of this is quite fragile. There are very strong civilizations in the region, of course. This is a cradle of civilization. Iran is not going away, not in a 2-week military strike. Turkey speaks loudly and clearly because the Ottoman Empire was a force to be reckoned with, and Turkey continues to be a force to be reckoned with. Egypt is 5,000 years old as a unified state. It's 100 million people. It's not, it is vulnerable, but it is not subservient to the United States. The Arab region feels that this is a bum deal that they're getting. They had Ottoman rule for hundreds of years, then they had British rule. Now they have American rule. I think that they actually would like sovereignty. So I don't feel that this is an end game either. My view is the United States is fighting for its global hegemony, but it's not winning the global hegemony because the realities are that we're already in a multipolar world where the United States has no particular chokehold on anything, though it still has a very powerful military. From my point of view, as pivotal and dramatic as these events in Iran were, an equally pivotal event was Chancellor Merz's visit to China and watching Merz watch in amazement the robotics demonstration taking place in China. The truth is, no Western country can do what China is doing. That's the deeper truth. China's keeping its powder dry. It's not going to war. It's not as stupid as the United States. It's not squandering its resources like the United States is doing. So there's a deeper pattern here. And I hope that India follows that line as well.
Final word, if an Iranian is listening to this program as an American, what would be your message?
Well, my message is, of course, sorrow, condolences, sympathy. People should understand in Iran that as Americans, we are against what is happening. We are against the machinations of our CIA. We are against these wars. These are not wars by Americans. These are wars by the military-industrial complex of America. Unfortunately, the American people have no say in this right now, but we're working to have a say.
We'll leave it there, Professor Sachs.